Hello everyone, it's AJ here again, and today I'm with someone who's going to teach us about editing, mixing, and more. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello everyone, my name is Eddie, and we're going to be diving in and we're going to be learning a lot more about editing and mixing in the program Audition.
Cool. Yeah, let's jump in and look at what we're going to cover today. So there are a bunch of online catalogs for free content, so the stuff we're using today is probably mostly from those catalogs.
Yep.
And we recorded a voice with our H6 recorder. So you can see there's free music archive, Sounds Abound, Adobe Sound Effects Library, and Sound Bible. There's many more. These are ones that we know are excellent choices, and there's links right down in the description below this video. So there you can find the different kinds of things we're looking for here.
Yep.
So then when we actually go into Audition, you're going to show us how to prepare the voice. And what are the main steps there?
Yeah, so the main steps with preparing the voice are we're going to be using the waveform view as opposed to the multi-track view.
Okay.
And we're going to be adding an effect from the effects it's effects rack, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to be adding those effects to the voice. Those effects are going to do things like limit the voice so it doesn't go over 0 decibels.
Okay.
We're going to do things like reduce some of the sound of the voice when you're not talking, so that it's a lot quieter as well.
Okay.
And it's going to do things specific for if you're like a male vocal or a female vocal, like raise certain sounds and lower other ones.
Okay, that sounds great. Another way in which we're going to prepare the voice, but this is for all of our clips, is cutting and moving clips. So in this case we have a poem, so we're going to cut up each line of the poem so it stands alone, and then we can set the pace of how that poem is being delivered. We're going to look at track volume. That should be fairly simple. At volume envelope, it's a little more complex. Basically, it's using keyframes to determine when volume should raise and when it should lower throughout a track, right?
Right.
And then finally, we'll just look at kind of finishing up our mix and adding the little details with equalization, reverb, and showing you where the rest of the effect. So let's just jump right in with preparing voice.
All right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to jump right into Audition. And in Audition, we have our 2 different views. We have our waveform view, and we have our multi-track view. Now we're going to be focusing on the waveform view here, and I actually have my audio file. It's going to start out as an MP3 file, and even when we finish it, it's going to stay as an MP3 until we move it to the multi-track, and I'll show you what that means in a little bit. But we have our audio here. When we play through the audio, we'll see the audio levels kind of rise and fall. If we've recorded it properly, it shouldn't go over 0 decibels. You see how it went over there at least once here. And it leaves a little red tick mark for us if it has gone over. So that's something to keep in mind as you're editing your music. You're going to go through, and over here we have our effects rack. That's going to be right below your files. And in your effects rack, we actually have some presets. So in these presets, you have 2 different options that you can use. The DS and limit for female voiceover or the DS and limit for male voiceover. Now these presets, all of them actually contain multiple effects. You can choose a specific effect by going down and clicking the side arrow, and then you can go to Special, Mastering, and you can choose, there we go, and you can choose from the different mastering effects if you want to use those. But in our case, we're actually going to use a preset. So I'm going to get rid of that, and we're going to use DS and limit for male voiceover. This happened to be a male recording of a voiceover.
So just to review really quick, so we bring in a file, we go to the effects rack, which sometimes the effects rack's hard to find, everybody, but if you have the media browser up, you can find it right next to that. And then you just chose a preset. I just want to point out the effects rack, once you get really used to it, you probably won't use the presets anymore, or you'll only use them as a kind of a crutch to get going. But anyways, when you're getting started, these are excellent tools to use.
Yes. And you can also, just one additional point, you can also edit these once you have them in. So even once you have a preset in, you can edit it a little bit further if you want. Once again, you're going to be clicking on that effect, and then you can go in and you can change some of the properties of those effects. Yeah. But for this, we're just going to use the preset as it is. And once we're ready to add that preset to our media, we want to just hit the apply button. That's going to be down at the bottom of the effects rack, right next to this power on, power off button. You can use this button here to turn on or off the effect so you can hear what it sounds like. When it's green, the effect is turned on. When it's black, the effect is turned off. So once your effect is turned on and you hear it and you like it, you can just hit apply. It's going to render the track while applying the effects to that track, and you'll see the waveform actually changes once those effects are applied.
Yeah, that's a big change. So this is going to make the voice, the end result is the voice is a little louder, and it's a little clearer, and it's even nice in between the quiet parts.
And the other thing that I did mention is there's the limiter there as well.
Oh, can we turn it up a little bit?
Yeah.
Did I ruin something?
Don't think so. I think you just, well, maybe. Control Z is our friend. So if I play the audio here. So, where I'm from, Paul, take 1. I am from Sega Genesis and Jollof Rice and Hooked on Phonics. I am from St. So stop it there.
Can we see, I'm going to say Control Z one more time. Let's see what that sounded like without the effects.
Yep.
If you can back it up a little bit.
So I'm going to start it from the top.
Yeah.
Here we go. So, where I'm from, Paul, take 1.
Oh, we got to undo.
I am from... Oh, yes. Without the effects.
Yeah.
Apologies. We'll start it. Start before they applied it. Here we go. So, where I'm from, Paul, take 1. I am from Sega Genesis and Jollof Rice and Hooked on Phonics. I am from St. Louis suburb and a 1-car garage and warm, friendly neighbors.
So I'm turning it on and off.
I'm from
All right, cool. Well, I think that's enough for prepping the voice. So how do you bring that into the multi-track then?
Yes. So the next step is actually starting our multi-track session. So in my case, I have a session here. If you don't have a session, you're going to click on multi-track and it'll actually ask you to create a session.
Oh, that's very simple.
Yeah.
Let me just check our PowerPoint to see what the next topic is really quick before we jump into it. So we did preparing voice, and now we're going to show how to put the voice into the multi-track, and then we're going to go right into cutting and moving clips.
Right. So the next thing we're going to do is, now that we have our voice, we've applied our effect, we're going to move it into the multi-track view. Now, I have a project open here that looks like what we're going to end up with. So instead, I'm actually going to create a new session. So I'm going to go File, let's see.
I think we could just stick with this.
Stick with it?
Yeah.
All right.
Because most people should already be at this step.
Yeah. So essentially what you're going to do is you're going to take your MP3 file, and I'm just going to use a blank track
Yeah, maybe
here.
throw it on a new track, thanks.
And you're going to pull it into this track, and it's going to give you a message here. This message is basically saying that we have to change the sample rate to match the session. So we're going to do that. And it's also going to change the file format from an MP3 file to a WAV file.
Okay.
So you're going to get a new file that's titled WAV, and then you'll have your file here in the project. The next thing that you're going to do is you can use the tools up here to move things around. You have the Move tool, which is also highlighted by the V key. You can move your track left and right. Maybe you don't want your track to start right away at the beginning. And then you also have the Razor tool, which is the R tool. I'll show you that in just a moment, but first, with the Move tool, there's a couple things that you can do. The first thing that you can do is my track. I'm going to just solo this track just so we can hear it by itself. And if you hit the space bar, that's another way to play your track. Where I'm from, Paul, take 1. So I have a little bit of intro here where I'm speaking before I begin. You can use the Move tool. If you highlight the edge of your track, you'll see this little red half bracket. If you want to pull that bracket in, what that's going to do is that's going to actually move the start of your track over. Yeah. So if I just play this beforehand, there's no sound before, and my track begins. I am from Sega Genesis.
Excellent.
Right where I want it to begin. All right?
And then you can do that at the end of the track in the same way.
Yes. So that's the first thing that you can do. Another thing that you can do here, and I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger so we can see it,
Oh,
is
nice.
in the corner you have these fade in and fade out. So if you drag that in, you can actually fade your audio into your track. So instead of starting at full volume, you can actually have it start a little bit quieter and then slowly increase. I am from Sega Genesis. So you can see the audio level slowly build to where we're at. So those are the first two things that you can do. And you can do that with any clip of your audio.
Okay.
The next thing I'm going to show you is how to cut your audio. So
Yeah, because right now your poem or this recording is all one big block of audio. It'd be nice to be able to change the effect.
Yes.
On any
So
portion of it.
as you can see, it's all one chunk. And
Can
I have,
point this out here.
oh yeah,
So here's a line of the poem you can see, and then here's the second line, third line, fourth line. So you could really read the waveforms pretty easily.
yes. And using that knowledge, actually, we can cut out sections of our poem that we're not speaking. For example, this section. Let's see. Right after I'm done speaking here. Genesis. So there I'm just taking a breath. And maybe I don't want to have my breathing heard on this track. So I can cut right at the end, right here. And I can cut right at the beginning, right here. So right at the end of where you're speaking and right before you actually start your next line. And I can switch between these two tools a little bit easier using the R and V keys.
Are they
So
right next to each other?
they are not.
Not really. One's
So
up and
one's a
down.
little bit up, one's a little bit down, but they both are, if you're using home row keys, the R key's right above your index finger, the V key's right below.
Okay.
So you can use the V key to click on and select a certain clip. And we're actually just going to take this little piece of audio out completely. And we can just hit our delete key, and that will remove that audio clip from our track altogether.
Excellent.
So now, instead of hearing breathing, I actually have just a pause in between where I'm talking. And the audio levels go all the way down to 0.
Now, if we have absolute silence like that in a recording, it's going to be really important that there's music or background sounds or anything like that that fills in that gap. You might not be able to tell from this, but anytime you work on any kind of audio project, there needs to be consistent audio. Otherwise, later on when it's in full volume, it's going to be very noticeable.
Yes. So in reality, this is just a little tidbit. Silence is never really something that exists. So when it does exist in audio, it can be very awkward.
Yes.
And another thing to help with this silence and breaking that awkwardness is when you have your clips, you can fade them in and fade them out. So any clip I click on, at the beginning and end of the clip, I'll have these rectangles where I can move and fade things in and out. So you don't have to have the fade be very big. You can have it be just a very minimal fade, but so that your voice doesn't end abruptly, it actually kind of fades it out and makes it a nice transition there. So that's another thing that you can add in addition to the background music. So once again, we can go through any other point that we have. Use the R key for the razor. Click where we want to delete. V key will change us back into the mouse. We click and hit the delete key. It's that simple.
Awesome. So, obviously then you can move these around, space them, decide how long those pauses are. So let's look at the next topic in our video here. So now we're going to talk about, and these should be a lot quicker. So cutting and moving clips, that's a lot of hard work. It's going to take a long time.
Right.
Track volume and volume envelope, they're basically the same thing. It's just two different ways to control the volume. So can you just show us how to do track volume, where to find that in Audition?
So on all of our tracks, we actually have this option. I'm going to show it for our voice here. Your track volume is going to be this yellow line that persists throughout your track. So if I scroll over just a bit so I can see the whole track, if I pan over this line, without clicking on it once, it'll show you that, and it'll highlight underneath your selection tool the word volume.
Yeah, so that line is actually the volume envelope, and we could just easily adjust that with, this is the track volume.
Yes.
And then this is the volume envelope. So we can add little points and then decide, okay, it's going to come up here, it's going to come down here, and that's how we can create effect. Sometimes you want to take a whole portion of your track and then bring it down. So that requires a few keyframes, as you can see here. And then the keyframes can really line up right next to each other. So it could be...
Yep, and you can have like abrupt drops in sound and abrupt raises in sound. Or you can have them be very gradual.
Yeah.
Another thing is once you have your envelope, if your whole track altogether, you want to change the sound, you can actually go back to the overall track volume and you can turn it up or down.
Yeah, and my advice with this, because it's really weird, it looks like a knob, so you'd want to twist it, but you don't twist your mouse or trackpad. So the way these are designed is if you click and then drag up or down, that's what gets them to go up or down. So just a couple more keyboard and mouse shortcuts there.
Yep. And if you want to get really savvy with it, we can go even further. You can actually click within the text here, and you can change that number. Now, the numbers that we're shooting for are going to be 0 decibels and below. That's if your volume is able to be heard. If let's say your track volume's a little bit quiet on your voice and you want to turn it up, you could move it up a couple decibels, but your sound may get distorted a little bit. So just be careful when turning your sound up. And also make sure that your overall volume is never going above 0 decibels on this slider when you're playing your audio back. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
For my audio, let's say I want to go negative, I'll go negative 0.5. So I don't really need to change it all that much. And that's going to just change the overall track volume up or down just a little bit. And as you can see here, the default value for this is going to be 0 for all of your tracks.
And then I'll just make a quick mention. This other knob right over here is your panning. So that's what determines if the track is going to be in your left ear or your right ear. And then there's a panning envelope here too. So you could do that same thing where you add keyframes and then you can adjust that. That goes beyond what we really need to be doing. A lot of what we listen to is on laptop speakers or things like that, and so you don't really hear that stereo mix, but you would hear it 100% on headphones, and if you have two speakers that are kind of separated apart, then you'll hear that for sure. So we've talked about all these topics today so far, Eddie. Can you bring it home and talk about EQ, reverb, and how to find other effects for our tracks?
Yes.
In the multi-track view?
Yes. So if we open up our multi-track view, and that's a good thing that you mentioned because most of these effects can be found in the waveform view, but they are also in the multi-track view as well. And I'm going to highlight this track specifically, and I'll unsolo this one and solo this one. I actually have an effect already applied here. So if I click at the beginning here, let's see. Did we add? Yes, track effects. Thank you. So you have, in your effects rack, you have clip effects and track effects. Clip effects are going to be just for a specific clip. And that's usually, I would keep most of that in the waveform view. When you're in the multi-track view, you want to go to track effects. So if you're adding an effect to a track, keep in mind that that entire track is going to receive that effect. So all of the audio that you put on that track is going to receive that effect, which is really cool for things like reverb, because if you want to have multiple little echoes throughout your poem, you can use a lot of different clips, move them to that track, and then the echo will be applied to all of them.
Yeah.
In our case, we have analog delay, and we have kind of our values set here. You can play around with those values till you get the sound that you want. But I just want to play the sound for you, just so you can hear what it sounds like. Turn that up a bit. And
St. Louis suburb, St. Louis suburb, St. Louis suburb, St. Louis suburb, St. Louis suburb.
so there actually isn't any reverb on this particular effect. This is actually just a delay that takes the sound of my voice and actually just has it play back and feedback into a loop, and then it will slowly get quieter over time. So that's what the analog delay does. I could also, let's say I wanted to add reverb to it. I could do, let's go Another time, that's okay. And go room ambience. And I'm just going to leave it as is, and we can hear the difference in the sound if I play this back.
St. Louis suburb, St. Louis suburb.
Major difference.
So now it sounds, not only is it just my voice echoing, it sounds like my voice is echoing somewhere, in this case in a room.
Yeah.
So,
Can you show us on this clip some EQ or equalizer?
yes. So, we can also go in to filter and EQ. And, AJ, what's your favorite equalizer to use on voice?
Well, for when I'm doing simple things and I'm starting out, I'm going to use fewer bands.
Mhm.
You'll see 10 bands will have fewer of these controls. If I show you 30 bands really quick, it would just be 30 of those instead of 10. So
Right.
it gets a little bit tricky to work with it, but it's nice to know that Audition has these
Mhm.
options for us. So we do the 10 bands, and again, going with the presets, you can think about these different things. Now a lot of these are not going to make a lot of sense to any beginners. Those of you who have done this kind of stuff before is going to understand what we mean by a high pass filter or a low pass filter. But what's cool is they have like vocal presence boost or
Mhm.
vocal presence cut. So boost would mean it's coming and getting out of the mix a little bit.
Right.
And that's kind of nice. So you can see it just changes a couple of the knobs.
Mhm.
And it's going to be hard to hear, but it'll be important in your overall mix.
Oh, yeah, I'll start.
So I started it way back
Yep,
over there.
there we go.
St. Louis suburb, St. Louis suburb.
So you're not going to hear it much, but if you were able to do this on your own with headphones, you can turn it on and off and see how the EQ is
Mhm.
fixing it.
Yep.
So let's go back to the PowerPoint. Basically, this is the stuff we wanted to review and cover today.
Mhm.
Where to get some online catalogs for free content, and those are going to be right in
Yep.
the description.
Below. Mhm.
Bringing in the voice, which is the one aspect of this project that we're recording ourselves, not downloading from online catalog. Being able to cut and move clips, adjust the volume and the pan we showed, and the EQ and reverb. Is there anything you'd want to add to someone who's doing their first audio project?
There is one little thing, and we kind of cut it out because we already had our audio files there,
Mhm.
and that is just the import. So
Oh.
I'm going to just jump in really quick and just show you all how to do that in case you missed it. So you just go File, and then you go Import, Import File, and if you're in your folder, you can navigate to wherever that file is. You want to click on the MP3 file. Once you hit Open, that's going to open the file inside of your file browser here so you can see it. So that was just a quick thing I just wanted to retouch on there.
Gotcha. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time.
Yes, it's been my pleasure.
Bye.